Welcome to the presentation on campus web accessibility and exploration of accessibility, inclusion, and belonging.
I'm Kevin Stifler. I'm an instructional designer at Red Rocks Community College.
And I'm Marisha Manfre, the Disability Access Technologist at Red Rocks Community College.
Thanks for joining us today. Here's today's learning objectives. We want to connect accessibility to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Discuss ways to increase campus digital accessibility, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and develop a continual improvement and strategy to increase accessibility, UDL, and equity.
So what is web accessibility? According to the World Wide Web Consortium, web accessibility means that people with disabilities can perceive, understand, navigate, and interact with the web. They can also contribute to the web as well. This includes websites, tools, and technology such as smartphones, websites, softwares, and other apps.
So let's look at universal design for learning and accessibility. Universal design for learning is a framework that gives all individuals equal opportunities to learn. UDL also aims to reach a broad amount of learners by providing flexible approaches that encourage student engagement, representation, and expression. Universal design for learning can increase accessibility for all students. Particularly for those with accommodations, UDL can make it easier to access the materials needed. For example, a study, Accessible by Design, found that using UDL can help a larger range of students who have accommodations. A UDL approach can act as an umbrella to meet the needs of multiple student preferences and accommodations all at once. For example, they found that a student using text-to-speech software was able to be more independent and relied less on their accessibility office because everything in the course was designed to be readable by the text-to-speech software. There's some additional resources on UDL cited here, the CAS UDL guidelines and the Equal Access UDL checklist from the Do It Center. They're great resources to check out.
What about accessibility in diversity, equity, and inclusion? DEI, or Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, have many initiatives to build belonging, follow the laws, and to support diversity and equity at campuses. So why should accessibility fall into DEI? Well, accessibility supports those with disabilities, which is considered a protected class under the US law. 1 in 4 Americans have a disability according to the CDC, which is a large population. Additionally, students with disabilities are at high risk of dropping out of school, which impacts all of us in higher education. There has been a push for adding access into DEI initiatives. You may see the acronym IDEA, or Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Access, which makes an effort to add access into initiatives around campus.
So let's take a moment and have a brainstorming activity. Web accessibility is not necessarily designated to one department. So how can we increase web accessibility around the campus as a whole? It's important to start brainstorming and considering some of these following questions. Who are the key players? Everyone has a role in accessibility, but who are the key people to connect with on your campus? What does buy-in look like? Does this mean financial, technological, verbal, or physical help? What resources are available on your campus? What trainings are needed? And don't reinvent the wheel. Think about what projects that are ongoing and that can be enhanced with UDL and accessibility. And in typical universal design for learning fashion, use the CAS guidelines to help develop ideas and actionable ways to engage and represent web accessibility.
So pause the video, take some time, jot down some of the answers to the questions above.
And if you pause the video, welcome back. We have some examples from Red Rocks Community College here. Through our Web Accessibility Committee, we were able to hire 3 student employees as Web Accessibility Technologists. These student employees were hired, trained, and worked remotely during the fall 2020 and spring 2021 semesters. And during their work, they helped with course support. They provided course syllabi review and revisions for instructors. They provided course accessibility reviews and revisions, course document accessibility reviews and revisions, suggestions to instructors for continually improving the accessibility of their courses, and then also provided course video captioning services. By hiring the student employees through the Web Accessibility Committee, They were able to work in both student and academic affairs, bridging the gap. They were able to help with projects that were not necessarily an accommodation need, which encouraged and demonstrated that accessibility is a practice for inclusion for the entire campus.
Another project on the Red Rocks campus was the Biology OER Grant. The biology department received a grant and were converting their materials using the OER textbook. They created large amounts of PowerPoints with corresponding chapters. With the 6 PowerPoints, there were well over 500 slides in total. During the spring 2021 semester, the web accessibility technologists used SharePoint and aided in reading order and alternative text to make the PowerPoints accessible. An example of the image is there on the left of an image that is a bit more complex because it is a biology specific image and required a higher knowledge about alternative text. Not only were we able to use a collaborative approach and remote tools, those tools were already available to staff, so this project was already in motion. They contacted the web accessibility team and were able to include us in. It demonstrated a commitment by the faculty to accessibility and inclusion.
The Web Accessibility Committee and the work study students were also to help with captioning across the entire campus. The student employees captioned between the fall 2020 and spring 21 semesters a total of 178 videos. These videos ranged in class support for math, geology, and even in our woodworking department. Another connection that stemmed from this was in marketing department. Marketing added budget to ensure that all videos submitted to marketing could be captioned, either in-house or sent to third-party companies such as Rev.
Additionally, there were staff and faculty trainings available. One of those trainings was Accessibility 101. This was launched in 2017, which engages staff, adjuncts, faculty, and student employees with modules to remediate and create accessible content in Word, PDF, PowerPoints, and videos. It was offered asynchronously or in hybrid formats. It was offered to all new instructors during the onboarding process. Instructors were also offered 4 hours of professional development reimbursement pay for completion. The completion also was a benchmark for tiered pay increase, so there was some incentive for instructors to complete it. Additionally, there was the staff web accessibility training. This was launched in January of 2020. It engages staff and students and employees with modules to remediate, create accessible content in the different modalities. It was also offered asynchronously or in a hybrid format. It was more oriented for staff and student affairs departments. This was a mandatory training for content editors for the web pages, and in the student affairs department, 75% of staff have completed the training. Lastly, there is the best practices for accessible course design. This was launched in 2019 and is an hour-long training offered synchronously throughout the year. It is additionally offered in a recorded format that's available to all instructors 24/7 through the Faculty Instructor Resource Center. Oftentimes, this training is used for the Global Accessibility Awareness Day, as well as during faculty and adjunct training days prior to the start of each semester. By training different constituencies, we can empower departments and individuals to create accessible and to be more inclusive for those with disabilities. Departments and individuals who have gone through the trainings connected to their own work and start brainstorming ways to increase accessibility, equity, and inclusion, better serving their students and coworker population.
So it's time for a challenge. How can you increase web accessibility on your campus? Consider the questions from the brainstorming part. How can you implement accessibility projects into your role? Reframe your thinking. Projects are not equitable or inclusive until they're accessible. Consider adding it to your yearly goals or department projects. And thank you for taking the time to explore web accessibility with us in this quick presentation. If you have follow-up questions, please email us at webaccessibility@rrcc.net. Sources are available, and we'll share the original SWAY with you as well.